One thing I really love about the Rockwell, Roosevelt, and Four Freedoms exhibit is that it affords a window into the spirit of 1940s America and how that generation got through an extremely difficult time. One thing that strikes me is how that generation was willing to be led by the dreams, ideals, and visions of our forefathers and ancestors, and even the Pilgrims' prayers as they're fleeing their oppressive nations and tyrannies to seed our own. It's 1941, and the United States is in the grip of the Great Depression. The stock market crash of '29 dealt such a devastating blow that people can hardly put food on the table, let alone shoes on their feet. The devastation of the Great Depression is leaving its mark on our psyche, as most American citizens are trying to hold up their heads with dignity, yet we're fraying at the edges and fracturing as a people. The most common sentiment amongst American people at that time regarding the war was, "We have more than enough problems of our own to deal with, and why are we getting involved?" And you know what? They're right. Yet Roosevelt knows that World War II is literally on our shores, and it's not a question of if, but when. As it is natural whenever you have conflicting ideologies, it is only a matter of time before they come to a head. Roosevelt did not want to address the American people and lead by a spirit of fear, but rather he would lead with a spirit of faith, reestablishing who we are as a people and helping us to see ourselves and our future within our freedoms. If Roosevelt could help us to shift our foot away from looking at our present circumstances, that would help us to make the right decisions to ensure that future generations would also value and prize those very freedoms. Roosevelt says, "The thing that separates United States citizens from the rest of the nations, at least at this time, is the fact that we have freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from want, and freedom from fear." And when you compare that with how other humans are trying to redefine humanity by gross and uncertain terms, it becomes perfectly clear how important, what a treasure, how valuable those freedoms are to our people. Because it is by these freedoms that a man might actually be able to live his life. It was a beautiful sentiment that helped to establish the American identity when you considered the world stage. And it also pointed to tomorrow and who we are as a people. But for all of its hope, we needed some help to hear it. Because I know for myself, whenever I experience any kind of setback, it becomes really difficult to dream. And so Roosevelt was extremely wise to have the artists echo his sentiment in various different forms, from postage stamps to war bonds to socialite events to films. The four freedoms were echoed from as many angles as he could pour money into, but none were as successful as saturating the human heart as Norman Rockwell. Rockwell had developed such a rapport with the American audience, his images provided a platform for us to feel a sense of unity despite many different circumstances. Whenever we lifted up the Saturday Evening Post and to look for some inspiration, his images were always faithful to redirect us back to the intangible substance of life. As you peer to Norman Rockwell's work, there's a sense of familiarity regarding each of the characters, whether we saw loved ones or neighbors and friends. Sometimes we'd even catch glimpses of ourselves, our hopes, our dreams, our childhood aspirations. Rockwell struck the chord with the common man, and his images helped to encourage us to form more deep, meaningful relationships with those who lived around us. Viewers would come away from the Saturday Evening Post and Norman Rockwell's paintings hopeful regarding life and willing to enter into it. When Norman Rockwell heard Roosevelt's speech in 1941, he immediately saw this as his opportunity to crystallize and capture the American spirit of freedom. Once you're in a thing, it becomes very difficult to see it, and so Norman Rockwell would use his paintings in order to help Americans see their freedoms in a day-to-day sense, that we might come to recognize ourselves in those freedoms and recognize the fruit of those freedoms in our daily lives. Norman Rockwell's Four Freedom paintings helped to quiet the contention between internationalists and isolationists, as for the first time we heard a resounding bell of agreement. You know, when I think of Norman Rockwell and his lovely effect on the American people, I can't help but think of The Wizard of Oz. There's this scene when the snowflakes fall, Dorothy and her friends wake up and remember who they are and what they're fighting for. Similarly, America woke up to who she is as a nation and how freedoms are an intricate aspect of our daily lives. We came together to accept, yes, this is what freedom looks like. And now, what does it mean to be responsible, to carry ourselves as worthy of those freedoms? And what responsibilities do we have as wardens of freedoms for future generations to come? While Norman Rockwell's images provided a means for us to come together as a people, it was the attack on Pearl Harbor that motivated us towards making that decision. As soon as Americans come together and say, yes, this is right, this is true, we step out. And we organized and strategized and came together. And you've never seen it happen so quickly at what rate we organized as a people. As America steps forward to fight for other people's freedoms, so we experience this massive growth spurt at this time. And it's on the wings of optimism and hope for the future that African Americans enter into the Air Force, the Tuskegee Airmen, with honor and dignity. Women enter into the workforce. Rosie the Riveter's building the B-24 bombers over at Willow Creek. They're glamorized and they're put in the magazine paper, and our heroines and our heroes are those who are fighting for freedom, not just for ourselves, but the whole world, now and for future generations. And through it all, you see Norman Rockwell's paintbrush lovingly breaking those barriers and mending us together, knitting us as a people, that we might experience a greater degree of unity and agreement and friendship and love and respect for one another as brothers and sisters, children in the image of God. Just as this exhibit provides a window into the spirit of 1940s America, that window serves as a mirror to our present-day circumstances. In what way does our media serve to unite us as a people? Or are we living in an age in which fracture is the name in the game of the day? We were in trouble as soon as we found out that bad news sells. And where is the father figure which shared Roosevelt's sentiment, by whom we would receive such words of truth and wisdom? Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Now, when Roosevelt spoke to the American public, he didn't want to speak from a standpoint of fear. A father doesn't lead by fear. But oh yes, we do fear. We fear his discontent. We fear his dissatisfaction. Who wants their father to be disappointed in them? None. Perfect love breaks the chains of fear. And so we hear how much he loves us. The truth is, the freedoms that we have as a nation are as a result of the freedoms that we have in Christ. As the Pilgrims were sailing across in the Mayflower and came up with the Mayflower Compact, the God to whom they prayed that they might have a nation in which they were free from the oppressions of a tyrannous government. You don't think that God carried that through? It's woven into the very nature of our spirits, of our souls. It's in the food we eat and the water that we drink. It is the fruit of that freedom which we bear and continue to bear through time, if we're willing. As a previous PhD student in science, I am transfixed on how our media determines the direction, our orientation, and trajectory for our wills, our values, and our future. We have turned a course somewhere. And so we must turn again in order to be considered worthy of the freedoms which we have. Are we so willing to shed blood for freedoms that are only going to lead us to death? We need to remember our responsibility, as 1940s generation remembered their responsibility to act as wardens of freedom. Let us not be addicted to rebellion and provocation, spilling blood and breaking down barriers for the purpose of self-interest as slaves to our passions and lusts. These things tend towards an isolationism hitherto unheard of, as it promotes the fracture of our nation to the antithesis of any hope for unity. No, we need our responsible image makers to promote unity where there was fracture and to apply the salve of salvation in Him, Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus Christ, He in whose image we have been formed, and in whose image we live and move and have our being. The question is, are we ready and are we willing to dare to live those Rockwellian moments in our day-to-day lives? Do we dare to consider and love God for who and what He is? Do you dare to reach out and love your neighbor as you love yourself? Messiah taught us that all of the Torah and the prophets depend on these two commandments. Thank you so much for listening. You know, I've been steeping in the Norman Rockwell exhibit at the Henry Ford for about 3 months. And the Lord has been so good to present that to me as a medicine, as a salve, as a potential solution to the problem we all deal with. You know, when you look at that potential feedback loop and to what degree it is more profitable to exploit human emotions than it is to help people to grow to be responsible adults and educate them on what really matters in life and how all time is His time and that He is God. When you see how all these things work together, it's going to be marvelous. And there's a song that I like to sing. And when Messiah is revealed, we shall be with Him in glory. All glory and honor and power and praise goes to the mighty Father, He who set me in that position and who put a fire in my heart so that I might tell about it. I'm so thankful that He presented this to me, because when you look at the direction that we're going as a result of our media and the things that we're allowing our media to plant in terms of subconscious appetites, which leads to direct courses and choices, because there's now been a reward mechanism involved, even if it's just for the laughs. Yeah. I do not like which way we're going. We need our image makers to be more responsible. I look forward to what else the American Museum of Innovation has in store for me. Head on out there if you haven't the chance. And please, you know what? Subscribe. Hit that alert bell. I really enjoy getting your comments. I'm just really thankful. This is what I do. Avodah, work, worship, and service. And I'm so glad that the Lord gave us bells. Beautiful bells and the sound of snow. He loves us so very much. Look at this world that He made. The whole creation just tells of His glory. It is good to be made in the image of God. May Yeshua bless you. Thank you for listening.